Hi, we're here today with Jim Dalton at TransNexus. Jim, how are you?
Great, Greg.
It's good to see you again. So we were talking a little bit before the cameras went on about some of the trends in the industry, and you hit on something interesting about sort of application-driven companies and how they're using sort of telephony and telephone networks to get their jobs done. Why don't you fill our viewers in a little bit on that?
Well, you know, Greg, I tell you what really brought up this conversation. This conversation I was had tonight with friends and other companies in the business here at Comp. Tell us about how's their business, how's the telephone business in general. And the good news is we're seeing a lot of activity. We're seeing growth. And where we're seeing growth is really new, interesting companies that aren't telephone companies. They provide telephone services. They're using the telephone network, but they're really application-driven companies. And they're moving a lot of traffic. And just, a couple examples, the customers that we have is like Clear VoIP Calling, Boxeo. They have a great business. They charge 3 to 5 cents a phone call, and it's broadcast telephone calls for schools, political campaigns, all sorts of things. I mean, it's web dollars, simple application. It has a heck of a lot of utility. Just an example, we had a snow day today in Atlanta.
Right.
A little bit of snow, shuts down everything. We get the call 6 o'clock in the morning, start the phone tree. And, it just seems crazy when you can blast this out over the telephone network, no school today, school opens at 10.
Right.
And that's such an obvious, simple, highly useful application that, it's interesting, these companies, they can prototype that application. They'll start with open source. They have developers. They put it together. They take it to market. Where kind of the traditional telephone way of doing business is, let's go talk to our switch vendor for new product ideas.
Right.
What can we do with our switch?
Right.
And if you're that kind of business model, it's kind of tough.
Sure.
But these new folks, they can move on a dime. They're not thinking about the telephone network. They're application guys. And the telephone network is kind of like the utility network for them.
And that's a trend we've been talking about for years, right? I mean, years ago when you talked about TAPI and TSAPI and CTI and all these things that were going to enable this sort of the applications and the services side of the business. And we're starting to see that on the show floor and in real business.
Yeah, it's definitely there. Another company we work with, Jaja. I mean, Jaja, I've never even heard of these guys. They come out of nowhere, and they're doing a bang-up business. I mean, the margins for these guys are really good.
Sure.
And it's driven by new applications, but also they're very clever and having very low cost structures. I mean, they're really IP application guys, and they do things you just could never do in a traditional carrier business. I mean, the carrier business is a great business still here, but the growth that we see in voice over IP, well, I think it's driven by some of these, a lot of it's driven by these new entrants, and it's exciting. I think this is going to be a good year for us. And those of us in the IP market segment, Miami, 3 weeks ago, I was real surprised at how positive that show was.
Sure.
There's a lot going on there. So it's, overall, I think things look pretty good about this show for voice over IP in 2009.
Well, good. People are still looking for applications that are going to save them money, and they still need to communicate. So that's what voice over IP brings them.
Right.
So,
right.
Excellent. Well, Jim, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks, Greg.